Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a graphic novel that I read, one that is about caped crusaders and terrorists who can't seem to die because of a magical sort of fountain of youth that they have. I am referring to Birth of the Demon by Mike W. Barr. He is the main author of the piece, with art by Dennis O'Neill, Jerry Bingham, Tom Greinberg, and Norm Brayfogle. Some delightful art and some not so delightful art that you will find in here. This is actually a three comic collection encompassing Batman's battles with Talia al Ghul as well as her father Ra's al Ghul. And so what you have here is Son of the Demon, the first installment, Bride of the Demon, the second one, and then Birth of the Demon, which is the third installment in the series. It's pretty interesting. I just read on the back something I didn't see the first time, but it's the sort of the prequel to Batman and Son, which was by Grant Morrison. But the funny thing about that is that that series didn't come out for another like 15 years. So they were just like, oh yeah, Batman has a son, and then just never talked about it again for about 15 years worth of Batman's history. So that could have probably angered or irritated some of the longtime Batman comic collectors, and they would have been like, what's the deal there? Anyways, for those who don't know, Mike W. Barr, Mike Barr is a comic book writer, although he doesn't have a lot of work published recently. He was fairly prolific in the 80s and 90s and a little bit in the early 2000s, writing for both Marvel and DC, particularly writing for various Batman stories, as well as a bunch of other imprints. So that's fairly interesting. Seems to have written a number of really good stories. Pretty interesting individual, but I don't know anything else about him. So without further ado, let's get to the story. I'll do a brief summary, a little bit of an analysis, and we will move on from there. So Birth of the Demon actually begins with the installment Son of the Demon, wherein Batman rescues a group of hostages and learns that the people who were holding the other people hostage were part of a terrorist organization. Batman runs into Talia, who informs Batman that her father Ra's wants to see him. And so Ra's lets Batman know that they're actually looking for the same man, somebody named Quayen, who wronged Ra's in his life, in one of his many lives. Ra's says that Quayen killed his wife, and so he's been wanting to take him down ever since. And Batman's looking after him because he's a terrorist and he wants to do some pretty bad things. But mostly he's after the Lazarus Pit, the fountain of youth that Ra's has, basically, that enables him to live longer and survive what should reasonably kill him. And if Quayen gets his hands on it, he won't be as I want to say as logical as Ra's has been, and he might just actually kill all of humanity in the process. Ra's tells Batman that in order for them to have a partnership, he needs to essentially get married to Talia, which he already did in the previous issue. And Batman and Talia get intimate, which results in Talia getting pregnant in this installment. However, Quayan manages to take over the base and takes control of a weather satellite in the process, and he's aiming it at Moscow. And so this, because the satellite belongs to the United States, Ross and Batman have to work quickly to prevent World War III from breaking out, because the Russians will blame the U.S. if Moscow gets destroyed. So Batman and Ross work together, and they manage to defeat Quayan. Although Quayan notes that that Ross killed his family, and so it really seems like Ross wasn't entirely truthful with Batman. But Batman can't think of that at the moment, because Talia informs him that she had a miscarriage, which makes Batman super sad. Although it's strongly hinted that Talia may have lied, because Talia had a certain necklace, and 9 months later in the story, a baby shows up at a random house in Gotham with that same necklace, strongly hinting that Talia may have lied and given up the child, or something like that. And so it appears that Batman, Bruce Wayne, has a child that he might not know about. In Bride of the Demon, Batman takes on Ra's al Ghul as he launches a scheme to completely dismantle and rebuild the ozone layer, which Ross notes that will destroy much of humanity, but he and his family will be safe and will be left to rebuild in the ashes of the old world. So nice of him to be the one that gets to survive. Ross, in the process, brings his wife back from the dead, and manages to get his wife pregnant. Although what happens next with that, I don't know, because that's not covered in any series that I know about. And so Batman manages to track Ra's down and begins to destroy his base. And when it looks like the base is going to explode, Ra's sacrifices himself and allows his wife to get to safety. And so it appears that Ross has died, although he has come back from much worse, so perhaps he is not fully defeated. And then, much later in Birth of the Demon, Batman is tracking down some members of Ra's al Ghul's organization when one of the henchmen kicks him into a pool of toxic waste, which makes him deathly ill and very eager, stressed to find Ross and his Lazarus pit so he can save himself and not die in the process. He does have a meeting with Talia where he reveals that he's sort of been funding archaeological digs for quite some time in order to find the Lazarus pits and to make sure that he has an edge on Ra's al Ghul. And so while he's talking with Talia informs him basically of Ross's origin story, how he lived in the Middle East, I think it is, over hundreds of years ago, like during the Crusades, and he managed to find the Lazarus pit, but the son of a local ruler used it and came back to life and actually murdered Ross's wife in a fit of rage. And so Ross used the Lazarus pit against that person in order to prolong his own life, but also to end the son's life. And then he took out the local ruler and ordered everyone to erase the history of Ross's people to make sure there was no written record that might one day be used against him. And throughout the years, Ross has grown increasingly unhinged, even murdering friends in order to protect the secrets of the Lazarus pits and make sure that nobody can defeat him. And after Talia finishes telling the story, Batman tells Ross to come out from the shadows, and he's like, I know your secret now. I'm going to use the Lazarus pit to make sure I don't die. But Ross and Batman, because neither of them can stand to see the other successful, they begin to have a fight, which ends with Batman dragging Ross into the Lazarus pit. However, it appears that Batman is the only one of them to come out of the Lazarus pit alive. But as Batman is digging through the sand, he pulls out a demon's helmet, which belongs to Ross. And it appears that this might be a hallucination, or this might actually be Batman succumbing to the madness of the Lazarus Pits. It's a bit unclear, and I'm not sure if this is continued in a further story. And so that's where it ends. In terms of analysis, there is a bit to talk about here. The first thing I want to talk about is Ra's al Ghul. He is one of my favorite Batman villains, just because there's a different dynamic between Ross and Batman, and something like Riddler and Batman, and Joker and Batman, because Ross on his own, he's not insane like the other rogues in Batman's gallery. Like, he has a lot of similar ends, similar goals with Batman in terms of improving humanity. It's just that Ross's goals are very terroristic, and that he doesn't mind killing a whole bunch of people in order to accomplish those goals, because he sees humanity as the problem. Whereas Batman sees corruption and maybe a lack of morals as the problem, that humanity can actually be saved. But it's clear that in these three issues, it's clear that Ross sees himself as a god. That might just be his entire persona, his entire character arc in terms of when he's introduced and how he goes about conducting his business. At several points in this series, as well as in other installments, he indicates that he can save humanity, but only he can save humanity or the planet. I alone can fix this, as certain former presidents have said. So yeah, it really seems like Ross fancies himself as a god or as a messiah, having a messiah complex, believing that if he gets the reins, if he can make other people submit, he can control everything and make everything great for everyone. Sort of a bit of eco-fascism in terms of sacrificing a few people to save the wider planet, or the vast majority of humanity. Ross views himself as infallible in his own narrative. When he's coming up against Kuei-Yen, he doesn't see that he did anything wrong to Kuei-Yen. Rather, he's a victim in his narrative, that Kuei-Yen murdered his wife, which might not actually be true, and set about trying to destroy Ross out of jealousy and anger. But the story hints that might not actually be true, and Ross might have actually murdered Kuei-Yen's family, which led to the bit of revenge. And so, but according to Ross, like, he's infallible. Like, there exists him and everyone else in the world, and anything that he does to those people is justified. But anything that's done to him is wrong and needs to be addressed. It's a great betrayal if someone works against him. He also demands loyalty of everyone around him, including Batman, and when he doesn't get it, he fights Batman. He demands it of his wife and of his daughter Talia. Even if Talia sides with Batman on the smallest thing, like to Ross, that's a great injustice, and demands either Talia's death or a deep apology that she might not even give. And so this just all results in an interesting dynamic with Batman. I especially love how Ross constantly refers to Batman as detective, recognizing in some way that Batman is of the same level of intelligence of him, that Batman is more than just a warrior. He's also an intelligent man seeking out the answers to whatever crimes he might be trying to solve. But another interesting thing about their dynamic is that when Talia is telling Ra's al Ghul's origin, a lot of the time, whenever he comes into contact with the Lazarus Pit, you'll see the shadow of a bat in the background, whether it be obvious or even subtle, but it's there. And so maybe that's indicating how Batman and Ross were always sort of fated to come into contact with one another. That because Ross's goals would eventually be to conquer or to save humanity, it's going to put him into conflict with someone who's seeking justice through other means. And so I do like that, how Mike W. Barr, like how they and the artists like put that there as a bit of symbolism and highlighting the nature of their relationship. Another thing worth talking about is Talia. Talia is the conflicted daughter. She's loyal to her father, but to a point. Whenever his plans start to get a little too homicide-y, she says, no, I can't go with you on this, and she often sides with her father, which again, with Batman, which that creates a problem for Ra's al Ghul, because he's demanding loyalty of everyone in his life. He doesn't want them to be subservient, although it's very clear that he does. He says he doesn't, but he does demand loyalty from the people close to him. She also loves Bruce, but she recognizes that he's very flawed. At one point in this comic, she says to him that he's dressing up, and he doesn't need to dress up as Batman. Allow me to read you a quote from this. Perhaps not. You of all men should understand why. You clutch at the deaths of your parents as a baby clutches a blanket. You know about... Oh, of course, I momentarily forgotten your father. Learn the shape of the face your mask wears, yes. It's true I do what I do because of my parents' murder, but that's choice I'm making. I'm choosing to let that trauma give meaning to my life because I've never found anything better. Really? How hard have you looked? I know of at least one woman who offered you something far sweeter than your mad crusade, and you have scorned her. You mean yourself, Talia? You are the daughter of my greatest enemy. Why? Why is he your enemy? Because you refused to release the anguish he felt standing over your slain mother and father? The childish vow you made to combat those you perceive as criminal. And so she's very frustrated with Bruce because he dresses up as Batman. He doesn't need to do that. He could be very happy with Talia, and maybe that won't help him solve the anguish he feels over the loss of his mother and father, but that therapy could fix that, and I'm sure Talia recognizes that. So I think that's a very interesting element of Bruce and Talia's relationship. However, one thing I don't like is how she's constantly written to be helpless. When she was found out to be pregnant, Bruce was like, "Oh, we got to make sure you don't get hurt or anything like that." So she was put on the sidelines, and that's often the case with Talia's character, is that Bruce handles her with kid gloves. She's treated she's written like she's a battle-hardened warrior, but more often than not, she's put on the sides in favor of a fight between Bruce and Ross. So maybe not the best way to write Talia's character there. One other thing I'll talk about is the amazing art. In the first two installments in this collection with Son of the Demon and Bride of the Demon, the art is okay. I wouldn't say it's anything to write home about. But in Birth of the Demon, I'd say it's really beautiful, and you might see some throughout this video. It looks different than any other Batman comic that I've really seen. I would say it kind of resembles Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on a Serious Earth by Grant Morrison. But it's still quite different, and I'd say it was very refreshing to get that, given the sort of lackluster art in the first two installments in this series. So definitely worth checking out because of that. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the series Birth of the Demon, a wonderful comic, or set of 3 comics, all about Batman versus Ra's al Ghul. I definitely recommend you seek it out. The first two installments aren't really anything to write home about, but I think that Birth of the Demon is really something special in terms of storytelling and an origin story and the art there. So maybe if you don't want to read the first two, just seek out Birth of the Demon, and that'll be something worth exploring. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that we can get the Batman name out there as if it already wasn't. So more people can find out about Ra's al Ghul too. Don't forget to comment if you haven't done so already, so that we can have a discussion about Batman and his rogues gallery. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and demony travels. Farewell.